Hello and welcome to the Voice of the People podcast here on KXNet.com. I'm Nicholas Kwolek, and today we are focusing on the race for North Dakota's sole congressional seat. Joining me to talk about that is the endorsed Republican candidate, Alex Balazs. Mr. Balazs, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on today. I'm looking forward to it.
So how does that sound to you, being the endorsed candidate?
Well, I think it's great. It definitely sounds better than just being a candidate these days. And I'm on the trail, and I tell everybody I talk to, I thought the process was an interesting one. It was my first convention ever, so I learned a lot. But yeah, it's pretty great.
So before we get into that convention, let's go back a little bit. Tell us about yourself. You're not originally from North Dakota, is that correct?
Right, grew up in Wisconsin. So my mom was one of seven kids, six boys and one girl. She was born in this house in 1926. House was built about 26 years after my grandfather homesteaded the farm here in North Dakota. He was a Svensson, so all the boys would be Svensons. My mom, I guess when she was about 14, was hungry, so she walked off to find work, and that's what I guess she needed to do then. And then she ended up marrying my dad, who was a Hungarian. So I'm blessed with that double thick Norwegian and Hungarian skull, and makes me kind of hard headed at times, but it's good for being durable. And then we were in Wisconsin growing up, but my father and my mom obviously loved the farm and loved to come up. When my grandfather passed away, my uncle Pete had the farm. We still kept coming every summer, and we just loved the farm. And finally, it wasn't probably 2000, somewhere around then. We were overseas, and Pete was getting a little bit on in his years and went to the nursing home. We bought the farm in 2003 from the family, and then we moved here when I retired in 2015. So we've been working on it since 2003. In 2003, it still had an outhouse. So we put water in it and fixed it up. And of course, it's a gorgeous farmhouse. I mean, it's just beautiful. So we still have the original farmhouse, and we're here today.
And what have you been doing for a living before running for office?
Well, since when I retired, I did some contract work training because I was the old guy who knew some good stuff, so I could go back and work. That was always nice. Spend some time with the Legion. Spend a lot of time visiting the kids. In the summertime, we're pretty much mostly with my grandson here. The last couple of years have been great, going to the pool and stuff. And we are very blessed. I don't know if I've been talking to you before, other folks, but here we are sitting here. The farm's paid for. We have our retirement. We are very comfortable, and we just decided in February that maybe comfortable isn't where we need to be right now with all these problems in this country. So we decided to get back into it and do our part. I think we need to give back a little bit for all the blessings we have.
But you're obviously familiar, from what I understand, as far as your background goes, with working with and for this country.
Yes, sir. Yes, I retired from the military. Was pleased to serve, and not half the hero of all the men I served with. They were fantastic, and my guys in the Legion, they were fantastic. Then I joined the federal government, worked overseas in Washington and overseas, learned a ton, and I just feel that experience working with both in the military and with the government taught me. I didn't get really high up as most people. I wasn't in super senior ranks, but it taught me the functionality of working with the different agencies and working with people, what we do overseas, so that I know when to call somebody out on it and when to work along with them, I think.
Okay. So let's go back to the convention. Obviously, we've documented pretty well here as far as what the results were. You came out on top. But I want to ask it like this. When you woke up on that morning before the voting began, did you ever think that it would turn out the way it did later that night?
So to be honest, no, I thought it would be I was a long shot to get the endorsement. There was a lot of backing for the other candidate, and I knew the amount of money and time they put in and how much time they'd been in the race. But I have to say, I talked to so many people at the convention that were supportive, and I was meeting great North Dakotans before that on the campaign trail, that I felt pretty positive about it. And then when the folks that introduced me spoke, and then we spoke, or I spoke, and the response from folks, I just felt, you know what, we gave it our best shot. These are great people. They're got a tough decision to make, and it turned out in our favor. So yeah, it always is surprising. It's humbling to get that kind of support. I really appreciated it.
Can you tell me about when you sort of had this feeling like, oh boy, it's going to be me, and then how the way it came about? What tell me about those feelings you felt and sort of how that influenced you to decide to accept the nomination.
Yeah, so we were all waiting for the second count to come because the vote was messed up, as you know. And there was people that wanted to have a voice, and I understood that. And I was actually up on the upper deck talking to a group of people who were saying, we're conflicted about this. We want to talk to you. Like, why should we go with you when we've been going a different way? This is in between the two votes. So I kind of missed the whole uh, parade at the end of Julie's speech and stuff. I didn't see all that, so I wasn't privy to all the excitement. I got back down just in time for the second vote, so I could. And then they started to count, and it looked like I guess we didn't have enough to get a majority, but we had enough to have that. We were standing down on the floor waiting, and then Julie stepped up. I guess my feeling uh, was pretty great. It was also like maybe we could have done it a little bit differently as a Republican Party, as conservatives. But at that moment, I kind of felt that those people that felt so strongly about wanting to vote or wanting to do the ballots the way they did should be heard and should be able to be represented. So if there's a process there, yeah, we were part of it, and we have to honor that.
Have you spoken to any of your, well, I guess they were, they were fellow candidates. They still are, even though you are the endorsed candidate. Have you spoken to any of them, and what's that conversation been like?
Yeah, I spoke to both of them since the convention. We were at the debate, of course, and we talked a little bit before that. Everything's very positive. We shake hands, we talk. I talked to Rick just briefly. He was getting kind of ready for the debate. Talked to Julie a bit more after the convention, of course. We spoke, and I spoke with her family, and they were off doing some things. And then spoke before the debate also. They seem to be in it, running hard. And my opinion about the campaign is that we're going to do this on policies and our positions, and that's where we're going to stay, because I'm not going to join the circular firing squad and destroy the party from within. I will say this: we got so busy at the convention at the end talking with folks because they were so great after we got the endorsement, and then we were talking to the press, and then we were cleaning up, and then believe it or not, there was some tape stuck to the windows. It was from our signs. We had to peel that off and fix it. And then Cindy looked at me about 8:30 and said, "Hey, aren't we supposed to be somewhere?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so, but I can't remember what it is." And then about 9:30, she said, "I think we missed the governor's ball." So we got so busy talking with folks, we actually missed the ball, but we'll get it next time around, I guess.
Well, a lot of my guests have been transitioning very well from one question to the next. So you mentioned the governor, the incumbent Congressman Kelly Armstrong is running for governor.
Yeah.
What, if any, conversations have you had with him, and what has that been like?
Well, we had a very brief conversation on the trail and, of course, at the convention, and it was very positive. We didn't get into the weeds on stuff. At some point, I'd love to get to sit down with Kelly and talk more over coffee or something. That's a tough race they got because Tammy Miller being endorsed by Burgum, and Kelly running for it clearly with a bunch of time in the Senate and I'm sorry, in the Congress, and knowing having his background now. So I don't know where that's going to pan out. That's going to be a tough one.
Sure. So let's say you are elected and you get to go to Congress. What's priority day number one for you?
Well, along with closing the border and starting to deport, which we have to do that, we've got to get energy policy back on track fast to get the inflation down, and we've got to start tackling the debt. So if we were to look at it like a tactical plan, we can do that pretty simply. Give the orders of somebody with guts, give the boss, the President Trump, I hope, gives the order, close the border. They start doing that. It's going to be messy, but they get that closed. We start to deport. We start to turn back on energy independence, which I'll call energy dominance, because we can be dominant in this world in energy. We're that good. And then we start tackling this debt from day one. And then immediately start looking at those 12 budget lines that the Congress is supposed to pass every year, those mandatory budget lines. Not all the fluff, get it funded so that we can go to the people and say, hey, we did the work. And if we can't do that work, tell them ahead of time. I had a meeting last night. We were talking about this. Tell them ahead of time, hey, we're having trouble on these last 3 budget lines because there's too much fluff in them. And I just don't think I can vote in good conscience and represent North Dakota. So North Dakota knows what's coming. I think that's important.
As we had the heads of the parties on not too long ago, Sandy Sanford and Adam Goldwyn, and Adam made an interesting point saying, even though we have, been a Republican state for the last couple of years now, every election has an opportunity to sort of change it either way. So with that being said, what is your thought on being able to work with Democrats if you were to get into Congress?
So this is a tough one because there's this big feeling out there that any vote that goes along where Republicans and Democrats get together, or conservatives and Democrats get together in Congress, is a sellout by the conservatives. But I want to tell you something I learned the other day. There's a little analysis that analyzes all of the votes that happen in North Dakota and everywhere else, and you're probably aware of it. It's called Leginate. And do you know what they exclude from that when they tell you that study? They exclude all the bills and things that were voted on by all the people. So when 99% of the people agree, they just throw those votes out. And I said, can't we see those? Because wouldn't that be important to know what everybody agrees on? So working with Democrats, here's the thing, you know, you're going to pass those 12 budget lines, right? How do you think those? I'm not saying this to you, sir. How do people think those budget lines get passed? If we have a huge majority in Congress, sure, they're going to get pushed up and in the Senate. But when we don't have that, they get passed with Democrats and Republicans voting. And I think everybody knows that Democrats and Republicans are going to vote together, like on defense, to get bills through. So we have to do those critical things. What we need to do, and someone brought this up to me, is as I'm not going to disparage Democrats, but it seems that they go more left and more left and more left. And we're supposed to go to the middle of the aisle and meet them, which means they drag us farther and farther left. Maybe we need to just take their hand and pull them back our way a little bit and say, look, let's work together on this. Let's get away from sound bites. Let's figure out how we're going to solve this problem. And I'm not coming all the way over to your side just to acquiesce so you feel good about it. And then we hammer it out. But that's what we're supposed to do, is hammer it out, right? So maybe we don't. Maybe we can't get along. Maybe they're going to put things in those bills I can't agree with, and that's not. And we would call that not working together. But up until that point, we're going to try to work it out.
Well, there's even, I don't have to tell you, there's even a lot of splits in the Republican Party as far as how far right people are going. So, how would you characterize yourself falling in those categories in the Republican Party?
Well, I feel like I'm pretty hard conservative. I'm pretty far right, and then I but I'm not in the group that says that we're not going to try to keep this country strong and keep working together, because that's what we were supposed to do. And there's going to be opposing views. You're going to have people that say they want to take care of somebody more than somebody else, or have an entitlement, or do whatever else. And we have to sit down and talk through those things. We're not going to get anywhere if you go in ahead of time of any battle and they know your battle plan and they know what your next hit's going to be. That's telegraphing what you're doing. And I'm not going to do that with I'm not going to call them opponents, but with the people across the aisle, so then they can say, well, he's a done deal. We know where he's going to vote. We have to be smarter than that. And then someone asked me the other day, am I going to line up with one caucus or the other? I'm not sure that locking yourself into one caucus or another is the smartest thing to do for the one congressional representative in North Dakota, because then that means I'm over there, or I'm in that locked in, and then that limits what I can do for the people in North Dakota. So maybe a smarter approach. I haven't exactly figured out how to balance that, but I tell you what, I'm going to be fighting at it the whole time. So
Obviously, polling gives somewhat of a good idea as far as how people may vote or may not. It's no secret there are some people that just are not fans of either candidate in either party for president. And we talked about that also not too long ago, about the trickle-down effect, about who's running at the top level and how that can, sway the vote and decide if people are sort of, interested or how interested they are in this election. So how do you appeal to either voter, Democrat or Republican, that may not be sure on how they're going to vote yet?
okay, so first of all, I think I'm a good conservative representative. I would also say that I don't meet. I want to be honest. I don't meet a lot of Democrats in North Dakota that are super, super far crazy left. I'm just going to say it. I mean, not the Biden, keep the borders open, destroy the country, down with energy, this kind of thing. I meet pretty common sense people, and I'll give you an example of a conversation I had with a definite Democrat up on the Spirit Lake Nation the other day. Everything we talked about, closing the borders, deporting, getting the federal debt down, getting the federal government out of states issues down here, all those things that was their policy. The one thing we differed on was I was pro-life and they were pro-choice. So I said to this person, I said, so, well, because of that, we get to wear these labels and we can never get along. And I'm just not going to buy into that. We're going to have fundamental differences always, but I don't think good Americans, 40 years ago, the Democrats here would be Republicans. I mean, if you looked at their platforms. So I'm not sure that we're that far apart. I think people like to create that division because it's fun. And I definitely think there are far left people like to create the division so that we won't get together. But we're not going to throw gas in that fire. We're going to pull together.
Sure. Well, it wasn't even that long ago that Texas was not, I don't think a lot of people realize Texas wasn't always a Republican state. So it can change. Although not too long ago, I looked at the Electoral College maps from 1984, and that's still the historical record, 525 Electoral College votes for Ronald Reagan. So, things
Yeah.
can change over time. So we mentioned priorities day one, but what else? How else do you tie in the priorities that you take? Not only to the congressional office in Washington, but also bring them back here because obviously different issues can pop up at home than they would on the national level. So what are some of the other things you're looking at possibly helping to improve?
So I'm learning a ton about that. Like I just sat down with the sugar beet folks the other day, and our policy overseas and what our government does with sugar, just with sugar, not to mention grain and everything else. And I sat with those folks too, has a big effect on North Dakota. So you got to, when we're voting back there to support whether a farm bill or a trade bill, and I don't know if you look at the balances on just these commodities, we have to be very careful on what we decide federally, how it doesn't negatively impact North Dakota. So we have, I think, come back here and understand and talk with these folks in North Dakota and say, okay, these are the things that are coming up. What benefits you? What works? And I asked a question the other day. It's really unstable in Central America, right? And that's where we're getting a lot of people. We're getting people from all over the world, but crossing that border. They're sugar producers. What if they could? What if the net effect of sugar that we buy from overseas? I don't mean to get in the weeds, but if the net effect of sugar we buy from overseas wasn't changed, but more was pushed into Central America and stabilized them a little bit, and there were jobs there, and then we were able to not have the flex across the border. Those are complex questions, and we need to be ready to look at those, address all of them when we get in there. And then obviously I'm big on vets' rights. I would love to serve about armed services and support those guys and take care of our military because I think that we're in the mess we're in today because we were weak. If we were strong, I don't think we'd be anywhere in these messes. We wouldn't have had Ukraine. I don't think we'd have the problem in Israel right now with these battles. So I think strength through peace is super important.
So obviously your experience both serving our country and working for the government has had a major influence on you. What's one thing that you've learned from either experience that will help benefit you as you continue to campaign leading up to the election?
I think we're talking direct to the people in more than sound bites about what really functions. There's a huge amount of dissatisfaction and frustration with what people see as government waste. Uh, things could just be thrown money, big bunches of money thrown around. They're in the government, both here in North Dakota and federally. There are very uh, good measures for controlling all this waste and pulling it out of there. And those are all already on the books. People need to follow them. And they're not doing it in the last couple of years. This just flood of throwing money around. So number one is we need to get back to that because there are excellent workers on all levels. I'm not going to say the senior levels right now in Washington, but at the worker level, they want to do the job. And if you were to meet those people, the CBP guys, the ICE guys, the people really doing the hard work, they would tell you that. You'd see they're really good Americans.
Speaking of interacting with people, you've followed, I'm sure, a political race or two over your life. What have you thought over the last 4 to 8 years of the sort of political attacks between candidates?
I don't think they have a place in what we're doing because it's just a distraction. It takes away from the people talking to the candidate about what they believe in. So it's really neat. It gets people fired up. It gets maybe a vote or two. I almost consider it a little bit of pandering because then they're playing to emotions rather than talking to people. And I see here in North Dakota, people get really emotional about stuff, and when you talk issues, they kind of come back to earth and they talk with you. And there's information in those issues, and I don't know if it was Socrates that said this, but I was reading some of the old scholars, and they said, if you give somebody all the information, they will always make the right decision all the time. But if we're not going to do that, if we're just going to stir them up, well, then sure, anybody can get out there and do that. That's not what we should be doing. And it's a bigger deal because in America, we're coming apart, not just between the conservative party where they say there's this big rift now, but in America, we're coming apart because politicians are willing to do that to get the next vote, the next dollar, the next position. And I disagree with that.
So what's next as far as moving forward closer to November for you?
Okay, well, we're on the road every single day. We got a bunch of town halls. I'm home today because we're doing Washington, getting ready to go back on the road. We're going to be out at town halls tonight in Lakota, for example, and down in Bismarck over the weekend, meeting people. That's our goal. I'm relatively unknown, so I need to get out to people and meet them. I feel like when I meet them, I get a lot better than I can get any other way. So that we're going to keep doing that right up to the primary, win the primary, and then we're going to go hard to show the difference between myself and the Democrat candidate, whoever that's going to be.
Yeah, how are you able to sort of, I shouldn't say look past it, but deal with the fact that, you have a tough go as far as, you've got all the other candidates are well known here in North Dakota, or have at least had their names out there before. So how are you trying to overcome that?
Yeah, gas and miles on my truck. That's the bottom line. Yeah, I feel like we stop everywhere. We talk to everybody. We'll take our time. I was at a John Deere dealer the other day to pass on some brochures. There were 6 guys there. It took us 2 hours. So we're just going to do that, and we're going to hope that. And people are reaching in. People are asking questions. They're calling, saying, "Can you come out to our town?" We're going to do that. One thing about North Dakota is, and I knew this before, but we're all really far apart. But if you stop and talk to somebody, they're going to give you their opinion. They're going to tell you stuff. So we're just doing that, and I feel that works. If you look historically, Kennedy never won an election until he got in his car and drove around the state he was in, and then he finally got in touch with people. So I think that's the way to do it. There is a grassroots movement here in this state that is super strong. I respect them a ton because I think that's where it should be, and we're going to try to get in touch with every one of them. I might not make it, and I want to say this to folks out there if they hear this: if I'm not getting to you, just reach out to me because I'll jump in the truck and I'll drive out. 2-3 hours here in North Dakota. It's just getting groceries, so I'll come your way.
And is that really the key? Because you are so unknown, you're willing to make those longer treks and more sort of, uh, you know, not a traditional campaign, perhaps. Would you say you're running a non-traditional campaign?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to see any TV spots. All right, so I'm not getting very much. I mean, I'd love to do some TV spots, but I'm going to have to get a second job, and I'm not sure I could do that while I'm campaigning. So uh, I might look at that in the future, but that's money that we just don't have as a campaign. And I'm being honest about it. If it's about money, then I'm the wrong candidate for folks to vote for. If it's about principles, and then I think I'm the right conservative candidate.
Okay, well, Mr. Balazs, I will sort of let you wrap it up here as far as anything else you'd like to let people know before we sign off for this episode.
Oh, okay, so it's Alex for NorthDakota.com. I would ask people to go take a look there. They can see some all the social media and stuff that we got posts up there and what we're doing. If you want to talk to me or you want to send me something, if you want to donate, that'd be great. That's a lot to ask in these times of high inflation. But more than that, if you like what you see, talk to other people and have me out. And I would say this to people too. It's a tough time right now. It is super tough. We are not in a good position as a country, but I think we're going to get there. I'm really positive about it, and the reason I am is because every day I'm talking to people, and they're going about their business, they're raising their families, they're taking care of their friends and their kids, and they're super engaged up here. So I don't see how we can't win through this. We just need to turn this ship in November, and I think we can do it.
Okay, well, Mr. Balazs, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and let the folks viewing this podcast kind of let you know who you are and what you represent. And we will see how it turns out come
Yeah.
November. So again, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it, and thank you so much for watching the Voice of the People podcast. Be sure to tune in again soon to kxnet.com for more questions and answers affecting you, because remember, it's your voice that matters, the voice of the people.